Recording in progress.
Hey, I hope you can hear me. I really was not able to hear you, Megan. Are you able to hear me?
Oh, wow. This maybe makes a big difference.
Now I can hear you.
Great. Fantastic. Well, we should have the audio going on both ends now. Welcome to Emory's Cognitive Empowerment Program. This is part of our community live virtual programming. We offer a really unique partnership with Georgia Tech and Emory to bring the Cognitive Empowerment Program to people with mild cognitive impairment and their care partners. And what we do at CEP, we really offer families and their loved ones an opportunity to participate in a comprehensive lifestyle program that promotes joy, purpose, health, and wellness. CEP is a research study at Emory University. And what we really do is offer 1 day of programming a week to folks that have been diagnosed with MCI. And we offer classes that cover everything from technology to different lifestyle interventions, different innovations with technology for people with memory care, how to improve your environment, make things safer at home, and also how to be more at home with things like acceptance and in your family, especially after a big diagnosis. This week, Debbie Arnold is going to be sharing about how care partners can navigate difficult conversations around memory changes with their loved ones. Her topics are going to include everything from driving to fall prevention, how to manage finances, how to navigate really difficult conversations around cooking and medications, and even things like keeping firearms in the house. So if this has been something that you've been sort of tiptoeing around, Debbie and I have been calling these hot potato issues. And she's going to kind of talk to you from the perspective of a licensed clinical social worker about how to be in these conversations with your loved one. Debbie has worked with individuals and their families as a licensed social worker, and for about 25 years, most recently at the Memory Clinic and Geriatrics Primary Care. At CEP, Debbie does all kinds of education programming, counseling sessions, support groups. She facilitates our Live Well sessions. And she really facilitates conversations with members and care partners privately, one-on-one, and in group settings to support really creative management of the challenges of living with MCI. And she helps CEP participants to connect with community resources, which she's going to provide some really good resources for you guys as well today. So once we get started, we're going to offer a recording of our session after we get done on YouTube. We'll give you some links to be able to connect with that. We're going to post Debbie's slides to a public Google Docs drive. If you want to be able to have access to her slides, we'll give you the resource to be able to do that as well. And if you are interested in joining CEP, if you're interested in being a part of our year-long research study at Emory, I'll be able to give you some information on how to be referred through Emory clinics for our study. And so give us a moment to get the chat going. I'm going to pull up some slides for Debbie. Good to see that you got some coffee and water going. I'm excited to be able to offer some of our viewers a little bit of time with you today, Debbie. Thank you so much.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right, give me one moment to share my screen here, Debbie. I'm just going to pull this up and find our slides and go ahead and present. Can you see this okay, Debbie?
I can. Yes, I can.
Fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and let Debbie get started. You know, in this webinar that we're in right now, there is a capacity to be able to do some Q&A. If everybody looks down, if they kind of wiggle your finger or your mouse across the screen, there'll be a little box that pops up that says Q&A. Feel free during Debbie's talk to drop your question and answers in that Q&A function. We can touch base at the end of our session and she'll be able to answer any questions that you may have. So please feel free to use that Q&A as questions come up. We'll kind of store them along the way and get to them at the end. So Debbie, thank you so much for touching base about some hard, hot potato conversations, things that you have seen day to day, year to year, week after week. Families really navigate the same challenges kind of in a thematic way. It's kind of the same things kind of keep coming up over and over and over again. So we're going to let you get into that. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Debbie. Thanks so much for being with us.
Absolutely. So, so the reason I think of these as hot potatoes is because nobody wants to hold this, right? We want to pass it back and forth. And I just actually heard about one of our participant families about an hour ago. We're not going to talk about driving, about this parent's driving until the adult son comes from out of town. The adult daughter is here, really holding down everything else, but driving is a conversation we're not going to have without the brother. So unfortunately, these are the most important conversations. And when we delay or avoid having hard conversations because it's hard, meanwhile, the risk of harm may be, we're gambling with safety, basically. So it's important that, that families be able to feel confident and willing to have these hard conversations in a planful and, caring way. If you want to advance, I appreciate Megan handling the slides because technology is just more multitasking than I want to do right now. So to me, safety issues are the priority. They're more important. Safety is more important than getting the names of all the grandkids right. And we may spend time and energy nagging our loved one that has some memory impairment about you called the kids the wrong names and it hurt their feelings or whatever. But really the only important conversations that we need to be having are the ones about safety. The others, we can take them or leave them. The names are not nearly as important as whether I'm comfortable with the grandparents participating in the carpool rotation in an ongoing way. Safety is the thing that matters to us all. Avoiding the problem may allow a small problem to get bigger. And the other thing is, this is rarely one conversation, right? These are chats that we may begin and have to loop back to, particularly if there are some memory issues going on. And for each of these areas listed on this slide, we're going to talk about how these issues may show up, whether the person has insight about their limitations or not. We're going to talk about how do we know if there's an issue, why do we consider it a safety concern, and what does the discussion about each of these entail? Because the Cognitive Empowerment Program is a living lab, we're always adding and tweaking our presentations to our participants. And I just added fall prevention to this slide because I think it's irresponsible to consider safety without mentioning fall prevention. But I'm not going to really delve into fall prevention because what I'm going to do with that one is encourage our viewers to have a conversation with your primary care provider or your neurologist about concerns about falling. And being afraid of falling is a legitimate fear. It's smart to be afraid of falling because falling is bad. And there are things that we can do to make our homes more safe. So I really advise asking the primary care doctor to consider referring to occupational therapy or physical therapy. The occupational therapists on our team at the CEP program do home safety evaluations, and they can make recommendations about where to put handholds and ramps, and without turning your home into, a hospital room, to lessen the risk of falling, because that's really what we're interested in doing. So for fall prevention, I'm going to kind of pass that buck to my colleagues. And the occupational therapists on our team have presented in the past on this forum, and I know that they will again in future. Tracy and Maureen are fantastic. So for the other areas, finances, cooking, medications, driving, and firearms, we're going to talk about how they show up, why they're considered safety concerns, and what these conversations entail. We did just recently add firearms in response to a member and a care partner who pointed out that this was really important and it was missing. So we needed to develop an outline to really address that responsibly. And my goal, not knowing who's in our audience today, whether we have primarily care partners or we have folks who have recently gotten a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment, my goal is to really represent the lived experience of people who have some cognitive impairment, and to encourage a dialogue with an attitude of openness from both ends, that we need to be eliminating, or at the very least limiting, risks of harm wherever possible. And it is an ongoing conversation in a family. So let's advance to finances. So how do we recognize issues with managing finances? Mistakes in bill paying. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but the truth is that this is actually one of the more common areas that will lead someone to show up at cognitive neurology for an evaluation. Sometimes the same bill gets paid twice. They've made the arrangement in the bill pay site of their bank, but then also put a check in the mail and pay the same bill twice, which, if it's a mortgage payment, that's a really significant amount. Sometimes a bill that's important misses getting paid a few times, leading to, maybe some utilities getting cut off, even though there's money in the bank. Difficulty with PIN numbers and the other essential information. A sense of inertia about making financial decisions or making poor decisions. Sometimes it's about the mail that comes in, piling up and having a lot of difficulty sorting through what I've already handled, what might be important. I might save everything because I don't really understand or recognize, what's the most important stuff that I do need to be hanging on to. And really, in this day and age, it's very little, because we can always get the history of our accounts electronically. So one way we know that there's difficulty managing finances is input from my spouse, my partner, my adult children. I always use the example of, if I'm at a restaurant enjoying a lovely meal with a cream sauce, and I might have it all over my face, I don't know that. I don't have a mirror handy sitting at the table in the lovely restaurant. I only know that I've got a little something on my face because my dining partners will point this out to me. So a lot of the kind of trip ups and hiccups that happen with MCI, the individual might not recognize that there are changes in the way that they're functioning. There's subtle changes, and depending on where in their brain there is an impairment, they may or may not have insight about the changes. And this is normal for MCI, for mild cognitive impairment. So it's essential that the person try to be open to feedback from their loved ones. And it's really important that the people that care about the person come from a place of empathy and gentleness, with recognizing that this is something that they may not know that they're doing, and that they may not, may not see as a problem until you've pointed it out, or even after you've pointed it out. So why am I harping on financial management? Why is this important? What makes it a safety issue? Well, the truth is that people with even very mild cognitive impairment, really people who have none at all, are vulnerable to scams. This is becoming a bigger and a bigger deal all the time. A week doesn't go by that someone does not email me and say, have you heard of this scam that, people are falling prey to? There are versions that come by text. There are versions that come by email. There are messages that look very credible and seem to be coming from my financial institution. And they just want to confirm my information. So I should click here and confirm, that they have my birth date accurate, and I should enter my social security number to make sure they have that right. No. It's really important to start doing finances in some sort of a team way. As soon as you have any concerns that decisions might not be made as well as they used to be. And this could be for somebody who's a very skilled mathematician and who is used to managing the checkbook to the penny. It does not, MCI doesn't discriminate. Asking to be added to accounts is one good strategy for families. We want for the person with mild cognitive impairment to remain as involved as they want to be. But it might mean that involvement might look like sitting together with the financial planner or an estate planning attorney to make sure that financial documents are in order, that someone else has authority to handle if impairment becomes severe. Because one of the tricky things about mild cognitive impairment is that it is often, perhaps even usually, a progressive cognitive impairment, just budding. So being prepared for that possibility means doing the finances together with someone else that you trust. And if you don't have someone that you trust, there are people that do that professionally who are bonded and insured. It might be going to the post office together, to mail the bills. There are ways to continue to be involved in one way or another. So let's advance to cooking. Great. How do we recognize issues with cooking? Difficulty following recipes or making a familiar dish, overcooking or undercooking, obviously burning stuff, the the smoke alarm going off a little too much, difficulty working the appliances, the microwave, the stove, the coffee maker that you have used, for some time, suddenly or gradually just doesn't, work as reliably for this person as it does for all the other members of the family. It might not be limited to the kitchen. We might see this in the laundry room too, or elsewhere. And again, input from family members is extremely important here. Sometimes, we don't recognize what a complex set of tasks cooking is because, we've done it for so long, some of us. Deciding to make a certain dish means generating a grocery list. Wait, let me first look and see if I have some of those ingredients on hand. And not only do I have them on hand, but do I have them in the measurements that I anticipate I'm going to need for the dish that I'm making? And I might have to refer back to the dish. How many people am I expecting to feed with this dish? Am I going to possibly double the recipe? Well, now I'm doing math in my head. So it does potentially get, rather complicated. So why is it important to recognize issues with cooking? It seems sort of like a rhetorical question. What makes the kitchen cooking a safety issue? But aside from there being sharp things, there's heat and fire. So obviously, these have the potential to cause harm if they're not used carefully and responsibly every single time. And that's really the key. Our brilliant colleagues at Georgia Tech, because the Cognitive Empowerment Program is a joint research study between Emory and Georgia Tech, and the AI caring folks at Georgia Tech are studying how artificial intelligence can support people aging in place and provide those little layers of safety that allow us to stay in our homes, for as long as possible and be as safe as possible. So it might be something as simple as, the appliances timing out when they've been on for a while, and that technology has been around for a while. If you have, the old style Mr. Coffee with the heated plate, after a while, it's going to turn itself off. So the thing doesn't boil dry and, smell nasty all day. But there are some really incredible advancements about if you've cooked food, but you haven't taken it out of the microwave. And if the smoke alarm goes off, they will automatically turn off the gas and the electric stove. So these are things that add a layer of safety just in case, and that allow the person who cares about the person with MCI, to also have another layer of peace of mind. So a couple of devices have been presented on Shark Tank. One is it's a replacement knob that has an audible alert if the stove has been on for an extended period, but there's been no motion in front of it. So it has motion detectors. And if the stove is on, but someone has left the room and just forgotten about it, it will sound an alarm. It will send a message to whatever, iPhone or smart device you have hooked up to it. And after those steps, if nobody does anything, it will just turn off the stove. So that one was called Smart Turns, and that's the replacement knob. And then The other one, which is called Fire Avert, is the one which will cut off the electric or gas appliance in response to the fire alarm going off. Oh, I'm sorry, Stove Guard. That's the one that uses motion sensing technology. But anyway, a Google search of these devices was like a rabbit hole to go into in a good way, that there is a lot of action going on in the ways artificial intelligence is being developed that can support us being safer in the kitchen. So the person who has always loved cooking may want to continue to be involved with cooking. So how can they do that? Well, you know, one way is to do it, again, more as a team. And it might be like, you know, bringing the older grandkids into the process, just so that there's another set of eyes and ears, and you're passing the, you know, beloved family recipes on. Sometimes you can make visuals together. If anyone has done those meal kits like HelloFresh, and they have a photo of the ingredients being ready and measured, and then they also have a photo of the steps and a photo of the finished product, and the steps are numbered, and it tells you how much time each one should take. So that's kind of a fun project to do. You know, if you have some teenagers in your life who like to do stuff like that. And then you're also, again, passing on those beloved family recipes. So come holiday time, you're not having to make all of those pies all by yourself. So those are some thoughts on that. And I think we have medications coming up next. Yes. So coming from the primary care geriatrics world, issues with taking medications are another very common way that mild impairments do show up. And again, you know, sometimes medication mistakes can happen even if there isn't cognitive impairment. If you have a medicine that you take close to bedtime when you're tired and you take it daily, by the time it gets to be late in the evening, you know, most of us would have difficulty saying, well, did I take it already? Or am I just remembering having taken it yesterday? So having a pill box, a Monday through Sunday, really that you can see visually, and someone handy that says, oh, today's Tuesday, or to double check that on your clock or your watch that tells you the date, you know, really can be a safety device. So remembering versus forgetting, definitely a safety issue. Taking medication more than once can be dangerous. Misplacing medications, sometimes depending on the drug, it may be a minor inconvenience to get it replaced, or it may be a really major deal. I suspect that right now, with Emory's transition to Epic and the new patient portals, getting a replacement prescription is probably a bigger deal. Again, we're looking to be open to input from family members or a care partner. And the geriatric docs really suggest when you attend an appointment that you bring, you know, a big gallon-sized zip bag with all of your pills in their original bottles, so that they can see what you're taking, and figure out, are you taking it as prescribed? If you have way too much of a medication left at the end of the month, then we know it's not being taken as prescribed. If you're running out too early, you're not taking it as prescribed, and those are safety issues. Being open to discussing what is your system? Everybody has these systems of this is how I remember to take my medication. I have heard probably some really, really creative, I take it in the morning, then I turn it upside down, or I put it by the window. And then when I move it over by the lamp, that's how I know it's time to, it makes sense to the individual who has done it this way for years, but it might not make sense to the people who will be supporting you to remember your medications. And for care partners, when we ask someone to switch from the turning the bottle upside down system to a Monday through Sunday pill box, we're asking a lot. So we need to be really gentle and patient with this process, and not get frustrated and angry about the person resisting changing, because not all help is welcome help, even if you feel like it's valuable. So just remember that people who don't have MCI can and do also make medication errors, and we can all use the support. So we try to just be really gentle about that. And there are fancy, expensive pill delivery systems, but usually they're not much good unless you're home all the time when it makes, the little drawer open and the loud noise sound. So that's my 2 cents on medications. You can also get blister packs. You can either get them filled at the pharmacy, or you can ask, CVS, Walgreens, all the major chains will do empty blister packs, and then you just sort of fill the little bubbles and put the sticker over it. And those are really good for travel, or if you might not be home at the time that you take your medicine. Okay, so moving on to the hottest potato of them all, driving. So driving is probably one of the hardest but most necessary of the conversations. It represents independence. It really represents self-reliance for a lot of folks. I had a group of, our support group happened to be all guys yesterday, and they really have an emotional attachment to driving. And it's understandable, especially, when it has been really closely tied with your identity as an independent adult. And there's great social impact when I can't even go to the hardware store to get, the missing bolt without somebody coming to my assistance. So, and the truth is that many people with mild cognitive impairment are still safe to drive. But because driving is a complex set of skills, and because MCI is often progressive, it is something that we need to talk about. And it can't be so taboo, and we can't be so defensive on the topic that it never, gets any airtime at all. The goal really is balancing the independence of the individual and the safety of that person, as well as all the other motorists, pedestrians, pets, kids chasing the ball into the street, everybody. So beginning the process early is key. People need time to adjust to changes in driving. Really, it's just important to have these respectful conversations. And each of us is probably going to need to retire from driving at some point. just due to age-related changes, cognitive as well as physical. So avoiding the topic of driving because it's hard just is not an option. So driving is so important that we've devoted several slides. Let's move forward. Okay, so because it requires a lot of skills along with the ability to multitask, it really is heavily impacted by any impairment. We think of the brain as the supercomputer. If the supercomputer is less super, it's gonna affect things, and driving is one of those things. Being able to drive safely means adequate perceptual, cognitive, and motor abilities, and these are all affected by aging at the same time. So it is that double whammy. So some of the changes are listed, some of the changes that influence driving ability. These top three listed, visual processing, information processing speed, and decreased reaction time, those really relate to the way in which driving is like, have you ever had to drink from a fire hose? So all this information, all of these bits and pieces of important data coming at me at the same time. And it gets very hard to sort out and sort through and make spot decisions that are accurate and timely. So it means sensory input, lines on the road, lights and signs to process, negotiating exits. What if there's a detour? So the exit from the strip mall that I'm used to taking to get home, that exit is being repaved, or there's a wreck there, and I have to go, I have to exit at the other side of the parking lot where my favorite Publix is. Everything looks different over there, and I'm completely flustered, or even partially flustered. So these next ones really are potentially age-related physical changes, but so mobility, like the changes in muscle strength, it doesn't only affect maybe my neck and shoulders, and my ability to swivel my neck and look over to my blind spot, but decreasing muscle tone can also impact my pupils. So how quickly am I reacting to changes in light, especially if you're rush hour and sunset happening at the same time is just cruel and unusual, but it does happen. And then peripheral vision. So we lose something between 1 and 3 degrees of peripheral vision every decade that we age. So by the time I'm 70, we're talking about, a decrease of 20 or 30 degrees of my peripheral vision field. So as my neck is getting less supple and interested in swiveling around, I'm also losing peripheral vision. So it's more and more important that I check my blind spot every single time. Our new vehicles do come equipped with lots of bells and whistles and warning sounds. These are somewhat helpful, but I also hear from the members in our program that, knowing what those noises and, the light that's flashing on the rear view mirror actually means there's somebody in my blind spot. That light is flashing and I'm distracted by it. And paying attention to that light causes me to not really pay attention to what's important. So that's where attention and the capacity for vigilance and judgment come in. So all this to say, I'm making this case in a different way than those other topics, because it is in some ways very obvious why driving is a safety issue. But it is, I guess my point is that it is a safety issue for us all in one way or another. And that's really the conversation that we're having. Let's move on to the next. How do we recognize in these issues with driving? Sometimes, although it's fairly rare, sometimes people will say, I think I'm ready to turn in the keys. I maybe got lost on my way home from church and it was so upsetting, or it was so embarrassing, or it alarmed me in some way that I just, I'm done. And more often, I hear people bargaining and saying things like, well, I only go, within a short distance of my home. I only go to familiar locations. My favorite one in this area is always, I only drive when the weather is fair, because, if you've lived in Atlanta for any length of time, the joke is always give it 5 minutes. It may be a beautiful day when I leave the house, and then the sky opens up and everything changes. But all that to say, there are various ways that individuals do display difficulty with driving. So if you are in the passenger seat, these are some things really to look out for. Less confidence about driving. Where are we going again? How do we get there? Let's not take the highway. I think we should, maybe we should go tomorrow. Increased irritation while driving. It just takes. I'm not sure I understand. Oh my goodness, I don't know what my watch's problem is. Really getting annoyed with other drivers, that what are they doing there? Difficulty taking turns. If you come to a 4-way stop, for example, or the traffic light is out, which is the same thing, not really sure whose turn it is. Getting lost, too slow or too fast for conditions, or the speed not being maintained. So going at a good speed with the other cars, and then it's more of a lack of attention. I'm not maintaining my speed, which also does become a safety issue. Getting tickets, having fender benders, dings on the car. Another one is, needing new tires. One of the gentlemen in our group yesterday told me it was too expensive for him to keep buying new tires. He kept hitting the curb. And it also occurred to him that it might not be the curb that he hit. He could hit something or someone, and that would be worse than new tires. So he did retire from driving. Difficulty with left turns is a very studied phenomenon. It's very common, and we think it has to do with changes with depth perception. Response time, difficulty parking, finding a parking space, getting in and out of parking spaces. Reverse just doesn't make sense, looking in the rear view. And aiming the back of the car successfully, being distracted, confusion at exits. But the biggest way that we recognize issues with driving is input from family and friends. People saying, I just think it's time for someone else to do the driving. So let's move on. So I put this slide in here just to let you know that the Hartford, which is like the insurance partner of the AARP, has wonderful free booklets available that talk about cognitive impairment and driving, that talk about how to have the conversations, that refer you to the relevant documents at the Department of Motor Vehicles if you have concerns about someone's driving and they refuse to, to change their habits. So that's what that's about. And then can you advance, Megan? The other really good resource is professional driving assessments. So these are different than the driving tests that our teenager new drivers take, even though I think that may be the picture there. But because driving assessments may not be covered entirely by insurance, I would talk with the doctor, the primary care doctor or the neurologist if you are interested in a referral for a driving assessment, because if there's going to be any reimbursement at all, that's going to be your best bet. It's a two-part assessment. Part one will be in the clinic, assessing vision, reflexes, mobility, and strength. And part two is like a behind the wheel. So they will provide a recommendation at the end of the assessment. And it is not always no driving for you. Sometimes it is the person is fine to drive. Sometimes there are restrictions, like only in daytime or only within a certain perimeter of their home. So do we want to advance? Am I out of time? Let's skip this one. I do want to just touch on this. If I do I have time left, Megan? We're good?
Yeah, yeah. If we can just reserve about 5 minutes at the end, Toma is going to offer a little opportunity for folks to join her Google Home study. So
okay, great.
We've got about 5 more minutes, Debbie.
Okay, fantastic. I won't need that much. So I do want to touch on the issue of guns because this was brought to my attention by one of our care partners who said, we have guns at home, we have ammo at home, and the person with the diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment really is emotionally attached to this gun collection. Some of them are heirlooms. They've been in the family for years. How do we deal with this? How do we talk about this? So this was added in response to that suggestion. So people who own guns have generally been well trained. They know how to clean and fire their weapons, and they are used to applying these standards rigorously every single time, because that's what's necessary to avoid harm, and they've done well doing that throughout their lives. But like driving, gun safety really depends upon accurate perceptual, cognitive, and motor abilities. Again, they're also impacted by aging. So the tricky thing about firearms is that cognitive changes may impair our ability to interpret the cues coming from the environment. If I'm awakened to a stranger in my home, you know, I'm gonna go 0 to 60 and not ask any questions. So the ability to regulate emotions and respond to a situation appropriately may be impaired. The other thing is that depression and suicidal behavior are just at a much higher rate among those with a dementia diagnosis. So having lethal means available becomes dangerous. And we just need to be able to have these conversations, even if we are attached to the guns. Let's advance so that we can. So the issue is also that, you know, in some cases, locking or disabling guns is not really enough. If a person has always had a gun for protection, and if and when they perceive danger, they will do whatever they need to do to have access to that gun. And even if that weapon is not loaded, others, including law enforcement, may respond to the individual holding a gun without wondering whether it's loaded or not. And we have had some tragedies in Georgia of this nature. So the very best option is removing weapons from the home, starting with considering who will eventually inherit, transferring those guns sooner than later so that the new owner can take over safe storage and maintenance. And selling or donating a valuable collection is sometimes part of estate planning. If it's valuable, it may, you know, it may help you to afford the lifestyle that you've always wanted in your retirement. Unloaded guns, of course, should be stored separately from ammunition. And every adult in a home with a gun should always know proper handling. So even if one spouse has really never had much interest in guns, one step to take might be for that person to get some training, you know, just so in the process of rehoming weapons, everyone is safe. So that's my 2 cents on gun safety. And then I think the next that is just for questions, but if we want to let Toma go ahead and then see what we have in the way of time for questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Debbie. I know a lot of these conversations, it's nice to have an entryway to start them, and safety is always, we say, the bottom line. So given some framework on how to have these conversations, we did have a question come up in the chat. I put some resources about driving available from the Emory Cognitive Clinics there for you guys. There are some driving review clinics through Emory and some other things like that are resourced in there. And I just want to offer a moment for Toma to come in. Toma is a CEP favorite. She's been with us really since the beginning of her designing the study. And so Toma's going to give you a little bit of background on her study, her role at CEP, some of the touch points that you can have to have more technology in your home. And it's technology that really integrates easily into your home through a Google Home program, something that's kind of less invasive, but something that can be a resource to those with memory loss. We mentioned some things earlier, Debbie said about like helping with dinner and having timers and reminders, and those are all things she can teach you how to do. So I'll give Toma a minute to introduce herself and give you some ways to sign up for her study where she can hook you up with some of these Google Homes herself. So give me just one moment. Hey, Toma.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. And hi to all of the community members who are on the call today. Megan, can you allow me to share my screen? In the meantime, like Megan said, I'm Toma. I've been running the Google Home project at the Cognitive Empowerment program for about 2 years. It's a really great project to get into